So uh,
Sorry.
Kamala Harris held a massive rally at the Ellipse today outside of the Capitol. I mean, I've never seen anything like it. I think it was something like, so they had planned for, I think, 25 to
It's like
30,000
wasn't it
people.
like 30,000 or more?
Yeah, so they expected 25 to 30,000. They had to bump up the permit to allow more than 50,000, and I think like 75,000 people showed up. Like
Oh
the
Jesus!
over, yeah,
Love it.
it
I
was
love it.
absolutely bananas. Just the massive amount of people that showed up. It was out of control. But here's a
I
clip
love it.
from her speech at the Ellipse.
Look, we know who Donald Trump is. He is the person who stood at this very spot nearly 4 years ago and sent an armed mob to the United States Capitol to overturn the will of the people in a free and fair election.
God, look at all those people. God,
Yeah.
it brings tears
It's
to
incredible.
my eyes.
The amount of
Like,
people who showed up for that thing's out of control. It's bananas.
oh my God, like fucking legendary.
Yeah.
Like, absolutely.
And most importantly, even with 75,000 plus Harris supporters showing up at the Ellipse, not a single one of them attacked the Capitol. It's amazing.
They didn't piss on the walls and smear shit on them. God,
Didn't
is
fight
she
with
even ellipsing right?
didn't
That's
even
my-
fight with a single Capitol police officer. Didn't try and hang their own vice president. It's crazy.
Wait. There's no gallows? What the fuck was she doing?
Those were just a
Like,
joke. You
how
guys
do
have
you
no sense of
ellipse?
humor.
If there's not a gallows, if you're not trying to hang,
Josh
Vice
Hawley
president.
didn't have to run through a single hallway.
Ted Cruz wasn't in a supply closet. Oh, what the fuck is going on?
No, her speech at the Ellipse.
Okay, that's it. I'm not voting for her.
Yeah, no,
Slice.
not even willing to try and overthrow the government. Like, what kind of vice president is this? But no, her speech at the Ellipse was pretty good. Though I have not watched it in its entirety. I've only seen some clips. But she's really highlighting the fact that she's going to be a president for every single American, whether they vote for her or not. That the past decade, thanks to Trump, has been extraordinarily divisive. But it's time for us to pass the torch to a new generation of political leaders who are trying to bring the country together and do good things for every American and not create divisiveness and strife and chaos. I mean, she crushed it. Pat herself on the back.
It was so inspiring. She was so presidential. She is so presidential, and a reminder of what we can be, what we are capable of in this country, and what we have acquiesced to the past fucking almost 10 years of this one man literally single-handedly breaking down everything that we have built in this society as a country, as a people, as a whole. And it's she's gonna fucking win, man, you know? And my boss, my immediate supervisor, like, he messaged me and he was like, hey, I want to drive some people to the polls. What can I do? And so I sent him a link to in Charlotte, the people that are assisting with driving people to the polls, etc. And everything. And he's like, thank you. You know, but I was like, we got this. I was like, we got this.
It's someone who's like extraordinarily plugged in and what's going on in politics on a day to day. Like, I do worry about the fact that, like, I'm not totally disconnected from like the average person or the average voter, but the way we experience just media, specifically through social media, like, you never really know what it is people are getting every single day, what bits and pieces and chunks of things that they're getting. So it's always like in that hesitation in the back of your head because you don't know how much people are actually consuming about what's going on. Because if people were consuming everything, it'd be a alarm fire. The country would be losing its mind because they'd realize
that is true. I'm sorry.
Yeah, we're on the precipice of Nazi Germany,
Sorry.
the Fourth Reich being brought to America.
Wiggling my boobs.
Please stop wiggling your boobs. If you're listening to this,
I think he's talking to me.
if you're listening to this on the audio podcast, there's your incentive to sign up for the YouTube channels, Pardon the Insurrection. Just put that into the search bar on YouTube, and then you can see Ty wiggle her boobs. But yeah, one of the things I worry about is like how much of this is actually making its way out into the public mind, into the voters' minds, because again, just the way the media is fractured and the way people's consumption of information is, it just comes from such diverse and curated or sometimes limited curated sources that you just don't know necessarily if enough people are seeing everything. But fingers crossed, hope for the best. I mean, and of course, like what you do see, what people who typically aren't focused on politics see, like I have no real idea, but I imagine if you were watching the NFL this weekend, you probably likely saw something extraordinarily, well, depending on what side of the aisle you are politically, you could say extraordinarily rewarding or extraordinarily frustrating, as Nick Bosa, a player for the San Francisco 49ers, photobombed a post-game interview.
And what was the whole fucking point of that? Like,
well, to show off his Trump hat.
Points in the first half. What was said during halftime? Hey, all right, Nick Bosa with a message there.
Now, I know that was likely hard to see, but that was Nick Bosa pointing to the Trump 2024 on his hat. For some reason, they've switched from like the classic red and white to the Proud Boys, white and gold or black and gold for whatever reason. I don't know what that was about. Is that some kind of messaging out there to right-wing people? I don't know. But that was Nick Bosa.
It's a dog whistle. Absolutely. Without a doubt.
Yeah. Well, that was Nick Bosa, famously supporting Trump, making his way onto the field in the middle of an interview to photobomb the journalist. And then he was asked about it at the press conference afterwards, about why he chose to make some sort of, yeah, I know, right? Why he was proposing to make some sort of political statement. And here's his response.
Would appear to be a political statement.
I'm not going to talk too much about it, but I think it's an important time.
Now, the right wing.
What the fuck does that even mean?
Yeah,
it means he's too stupid to speak on the opinion he thinks he has.
I'm not going to speak on it, but I'm going to photobomb an interview with it. But yeah, I'm not going to speak on it. No.
So
Get the fuck out of here.
A couple
Maybe
of
he
things.
lost a bet and he's not allowed to say.
You. Fuck him.
As part of the bet.
This is my middle finger.
So Nick Bosa is famously a Trump supporter. Like this, it's not fake support. Like he's like a real live. Like he's, of everyone in the NFL, if I were to ask you like which player would you expect to be at the Capitol on January 6th, the answer would be Nick Bosa.
Be Nick Bosa.
Yeah. So a couple of things there. First of all, the fact that he's unable to just even answer the question when he was willing. So like, again, let's zoom out even further. So typically when, players make political statements of any fashion that doesn't kind of vibe with what right-wing talking heads like, the typical response is shut up and dribble or shut up and tackle or shut up and
politics out of sports. I don't
politics.
wanna...
This is my escape. But then the second that, a player comes out and supports some right-wing nonsense, they celebrate the shit. And again, like the hypocrisy aside,
exactly. The hypocrisy. It's
I'm sorry,
not even
keep
about
politics
that,
out of sports.
but it's the fucking hypocrisy. And you are absolutely right, G. Like it's that is so frustrating and infuriating
So they're always sticking politics into sports. All the local Republican candidates around here, like their signs are like protect women's sports, I mean protect girls' sports. Like, okay, and this is just their whole platform is being anti-trans. Like,
Yeah. Well, apart from
politics
is it
sports.
Well, Carol, do not send your kids to school because your son will become your daughter and your daughter will become your son.
That never happens. That never happens, Trump. So
I heard it. I saw it on TV.
So
as Trump said,
the hypocrisy aside, so I know. So you would think that like me being left leaning, liberal, whatever you want to call it, progressive. I don't know if I'd use that word either. Yeah, I'm a libtard. You would think that I would say I would like to keep politics out of sports when it applies to, right leaning sports figures, whether they be players or whatnot. But actually, I would like more of this. And I'll tell you why. So typically speaking, I think a lot of players have extraordinarily distasteful political beliefs, but because they know that, they're not willing to come out on the record and discuss these things. Even as we have, it's like one of the complaints that was made about the way, I guess liberal leaning people approach this is they were saying like, well, when the NFL had these political slogans out on the field, it was okay then. And now you're going to be upset about Nick Bosa just pointing to a hat. Well, and like the slogans in question were like, end racism. So this circles back to the conversation me and Ty were having about like these social issues that are actually not political at all, becoming politically charged because one party in America typically leans into racism and the other party typically, combats that to the degree that they can. But that aside, like I would actually like more right-wing athletes and especially say like, people who work in the front offices of these organizations or who own these sports franchises to come out and tell us what their actual politics are. Because I would likely imagine that if you knew how many, I don't know if you like enjoy sports if you're listening to this, but if you knew how many, team owners in the NBA or the NFL or especially like baseball and soccer are actually these weird, crazy Elon Musk level Trump supporters, you'd probably start watching the games a lot less. And that's likely why they don't do this.
That's probably why you're not looking into it. Yeah, right?
Yeah. And then, what you can do.
They always said that sports were the opiates for the masses.
Well, what you can do is you can look at the way.
Wait, hold on.
You can look at the.
Are you done?
Yeah.
All right.
What you can do is look at the political donations of the people who own these franchises, and you will not be shocked nor surprised that most of them send a significant portion of their money to Republicans and specifically Trump. Now, also, I'm sure at this point, like this topic is being beaten to death, but I would imagine you remember Colin Kaepernick being blackballed from the NFL for taking, the opposite of a stance. And during the national anthem, he was taking a knee, when he was asked about why he was doing so, the comments that he made were, generally speaking, saying that he was protesting, police brutality against minorities in America. And that started a whole tire fire in the NFL and the media landscape about him taking a knee. And it ended up with him, once his contract expired, no longer playing in the NFL, not being signed to any other teams. Now, before he was taking a knee, he was actually sitting on the bench. He wasn't standing for the national anthem, but he was just sitting on the bench during the national anthem. And no one even noticed, but someone, I think, I forget the guy's name, he's in the military, did address him personally and be like, hey, man, not standing for the national anthem, like just sitting on in the stands, on the bench like that, that's actually disrespectful. Here's a more respectful way to make your point. So Colin Kaepernick decided, okay, well, this is being disrespectful. I'm going to be respectful to the flag and what that stands for, and kneel during the national anthem. And until he was asked about it and spoke on the topic, no one actually cared that he wasn't standing for the national anthem. What they did care about was that he was making a political statement, but not just a political statement, that his political statement was in the service of drawing attention to racism against black people. And that's where it exploded out of control. Now, you can say what you want to about Colin Kaepernick, like the level of courage that it takes to, like, stand on your principles to such a point where it costs you your career in a lucrative
And
job.
yes, exactly. A lucrative career. It's not like he was working for $20 an hour.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like,
Like-
and the endorsements that come along with being in the position that he had.
He was
as
this
well.
far away from winning the Super Bowl. Like it could all change for him. Now, I'm sure if you're listening to this podcast, likely you're in agreement with Colin Kaepernick's stance. But I imagine if you don't, you might disagree with the manner in which he took the stance, what he stood for or kneeled for. But what I would say is, regardless of how you feel about it, even if you dislike him or his message, you got to respect the fact that he was brave enough to not only do the thing, but stand on business when asked about it. Now, on the flip side of that, we've got Nick Bosa coming out here basically taking the opposite stance of Colin Kaepernick, not just supporting a idea or a principle, but supporting an actual political candidate that stands for the exact opposite of what Colin Kaepernick was. Well, he stands for what Colin Kaepernick was protesting. And then when asked about it at a press conference, he can't even tell you exactly what it was he was doing, what he was saying, what the message is that he was trying to get across. But again, if you're watching this podcast and you've seen everything we just previously shown you in this episode, you're like, well, we know exactly what Nick Bosa stands for. And I would just say, like, it's extraordinary cowardice on his part to not be able to even attempt to articulate the message that he was trying to say.
Why he did what he did, and to just it was a pussy ass move because
Pussy
he's a
ass move.
ass bitch.
Yeah. But one thing you will notice, I would imagine, is that unlike Colin Kaepernick, he ain't going to get blackballed from the league, and that speaks volumes.
True that.
So also in the realm of sports ball, I guess it's longer than a sports ball minute of the week. Also on Saturday, we had a Texas Tech kicker who scored a touchdown on a fake field goal. And well, he also decided to take a political stance, which is, it's quite something.
Oh, this was funny.
Burkhardt. Oh, it's a fake. There he goes for the corner. Touchdown, Reese Burkhardt. That's why they chose to take the three. A little something.
So in case you missed it, after scoring that touchdown, he pulled up his jersey to show off his shirt where he had written in marker on it, Trump 2024, go MAGA or something like that. Basically coming out as Nick Bosa Jr. Now, and again, like, as I was saying, I don't want to be hypocritical when it's like left-leaning athletes coming out and support a cause that I stand for. And it's, I'm not saying, shut up and kick your field goals. I just think it's extraordinarily hilarious that after he did that, he went on to miss the final field goal of the game, and Texas Tech lost by 1.
I love that for him.
Yeah. So, he was so focused on making, he was so focused on making his political statement that he forgot to do his job and ended up costing the team the game.
Do his job.
Yeah, it's pretty good because the internet,
Did he miss a goal? That was the goal he missed. That
No,
right then
so-
he sacrificed that play.
No, that
To
was a
make a
fake.
joke?
That was a fake. So a field goal will generally net you 3 points if you make it. But that was a fake field goal where they pretended like they were going to kick a field goal, and then he took the ball and ran it into the end zone for a touchdown.
Which was a really cool and brilliant move.
Got him
but-
6 points. Yes.
But
Now
his arrogance.
on the
his
flip,
arrogance.
so later in the
How many
game,
would the field goal have been?
3 points. So
But-
he
so
got 3
more
extra points. Yes. Now later in the game, when the game was on the line and the team was down a point, he had, or I think might have been down more. Regardless, he had an opportunity to kick a field goal later in the game that would have been the difference in the game because they eventually ended up losing by 1 point.
But it wasn't his direct actions. It wasn't being a dick that cost him the game.
No. Well,
Oh no,
I mean,
it was. I believe
Karma,
Satan was
but
at
not-
work.
Yes,
He knew his job.
Karma got him. And
Sorry, guys, I don't understand football.
Okay,
It's okay.
so no,
Sports,
he
no.
did
We
We don't have to explain.
previously,
No.
Carol, but
No
he
more
had
football.
the opportunity to.
Yeah.
I get it.
Yes.
I get it.
He
I
did
get
that
it now. I
thing.
totally
gotta-
get
hold
football.
on,
It's
I gotta
great.
plug my
He did that
computer up.
thing and lost the game. And then I think the big takeaway from that is much like MAGA, they think they're ahead and then they're likely going to end up losing by 1. So speaking of the stick to sports people not sticking to sports, you might be familiar with the fact that Stephen A. Smith, notably from ESPN,
Jesus.
has ventured into the sport or the political landscape, and he's also been making numerous appearances on Fox News this year. Well, one of these appearances, it went extraordinarily awry for Sean Hannity.
So again, we might not like something on the left. We might not like something on the right. These are the 2 candidates that we've got to work with. And when you bring up issues in terms of character or in terms of being truthful or whatever, let me tell you something right now.
All right.
You can bring a whole bunch of Republicans and I'll be cool with it. You can't bring up Trump to make a case against somebody else using those arguments. You can't do that.
Look,
Does
you know
he
what?
ever get
I'm predicting that
exhausted?
privately you're going to vote for Trump.
Oh, never. Never. And I told you I'm on the record. I'd have voted almost for any Republican but him.
I'm
Okay?
kidding.
Nikki Haley, Chris
All right,
Christie, I would have
all
voted
right.
for
I'm not
some of
trying-
them.
All right, so first of all, like Stephen A. Smith, like whatever you think about him, he's extraordinarily talented. And again, like you asked if he ever gets tired, I would imagine the answer is probably yeah. So like he's got to be doing coke or something.
No,
'cause this
fuck
motherfucker-
him.
No, he's
And
got to be
you
on
still-
TV. He's got to be on
No.
TV all the time. No, so politically speaking, I do not align with Stephen A. Smith on nearly anything. As you heard him even say there, that other than Trump, he would have voted for any other Republicans, despite the fact that the Republican Party is a dumpster fire. So, like, you can, like, our politics clearly don't align. And this has been an issue, like, with black people specifically. And Stephen A. Smith for quite a while here. Like his show First Take, when he had, well, we just don't even need to.
Well, I used to like on First Take. I used to like when him and Skip would spar.
Yeah.
On that, like I wanted to be a sports writer.
Well, Skip,
At one
Skip,
time, I'd
Skip
get
was
up,
his
I'd
Sean
watch
Hannity.
I would fucking watch Mike and Mike in the morning. Then I'd watch First Take. Then I'd switch over to fucking the Cowherd. And then like I literally all day. And I would like blog. I had like 3 followers at that time, but I would like blog. But when he became like a permanent fixture, it was too much sauce for me. It was too much sauce for me. And yeah, I don't agree with him about anything. I do appreciate what he said, like to Hannity or etc. But I ain't seen this nigga say nothing motherfucking positive about black folk in politics, about Madam Vice President.
So here's the thing about Stephen A. Smith. So he began his career as a journalist, but he is much like ESPN was wanting to do at the time. They started hiring all of these prominent journalists from these newspapers across the country, the sports writers and whatnot, to give them like journalistic credibility. And then a lot of those journalists turned into TV characters, and that's what specifically happened to Stephen A. Smith here.
Cheeseburger.
So a lot of those journalists turned like reporters for ESPN and talking heads as well. They ended up becoming these like TV personalities, maybe not to the degree of Stephen A. Smith. But so when Stephen A. Smith basically went, I'm going to try and be the face of ESPN, he took the formula from the show called Pardon the Interruption Interruption. That might sound familiar given the fact that our name of our podcast is part of the Insurrection.
Yes,
He took the formula from Tony Kornheiser and Michael Wilbon, and he flipped it and kind of turned it into what basically modern sports like talk shows are now, like debate TV. It did so with his partner, Skip Bayless. You might be familiar with him. So
Yes,
Skip,
I love Skip.
oh my God. Well, if you have problems with, Stephen A. Smith's lack of pro-blackness, I can only imagine how you feel about Skip. So Skip Bayless is the Sean Hannity to Stephen A. Smith, or was at the time that they were doing their show First Take. Now, after Skip left,
Cold pizza before that.
yeah, well, after Skip left, Skip was eventually replaced by Max Kellerman. I don't know if you know him, but he's not just hold on. So your personal feelings aside, so Max Kellerman was a guy who grew up covering boxing and eventually started covering other sports before working for ESPN. Now, one of the things about the course of that time span with Stephen A. Skip and Max Kellerman, and probably why Kellerman no longer has the job, is that a lot of people in the black community were looking at this.
I love that for him.
And their interactions. And when you go from Skip to Max Kellerman, let's just say it's like swinging between Kamala Harris and Trump. It's that big of a divide. and a lot of black people were looking at this like, hey man, Max Kellerman seems to be a lot more pro-black than Stephen A. Smith. And I'm sure that was one of the things that was probably irritating and frustrating to Smith. I don't know that to be the truth personally, but I mean, I'm telling you, it was a thing. And I say that in regards to the fact that the shut up and dribble people took a sports talk show host and plopped them right down on Fox next to these clowns, and have no problem with that. But then every time there's a social issue, they want to kind of, trash the left or trash left-leaning athletes for speaking up about it. And just also to say this about Stephen A. Smith, I don't appreciate someone of his caliber and of his stature who does often tend to speak for the black community, or at least in the sports arena, lending his credibility to a propaganda network like Fox, even if he's on there to be an antagonist from time to time. So yeah, I don't approve. I know Stephen A. Smith don't give a shit about what I think, but just telling you that, like, in regards to watching black people do things to gain prominence, there is a line that you cross where you're lending your credibility and your black face to something that is just extraordinarily anti-black. It's disheartening and frustrating.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. All right, before we get out of here, I'll wrap us up with my closing thoughts. So I'm sure many of you are aware of the fact that the Washington Post and LA Times, the editorial boards, penned an endorsement for Kamala Harris, but those endorsements were shelved because the owners in that regard personally intervened and made sure that the editorial board didn't have the newspaper put out an endorsement. And there's a couple of issues I have with that. I don't know actually what the specific discourse is out here on social media, but I can tell you how I feel about it. A couple things. One, it was a stupid move for specifically Jeff Bezos and the Washington Post to have this endorsement pulled, because the paper would have just endorsed it. In this political climate, no one's really paying that much attention to newspapers. The endorsement wouldn't have been a story. It would have been a thing on, Twitter for an hour.
I mean, it would have been passed by like the blip. Oh, Washington Post.
It would have been blown over.
And then moved on.
Instead, what you have is a media firestorm, because once it was reported that Bezos personally intervened and then apparently wasn't going to get a meeting with the Trump campaign until after he made sure they pulled their endorsement, it turned into a frenzy about whether you can even trust the Washington Post to report accurately on any kind of issue, political or otherwise, if it's not in service of Jeff Bezos. And as big of an issue as that is, like, that's not even the biggest issue for me. The biggest issue for me is that we already know what Trump is about, what he plans to do with the second term if he wins. And the fact that you as a journalistic entity are being controlled by one person who has interests that could be severely hampered by a second Trump administration, already obeying a dictator in advance, that screams to me the fact that if Trump does become president and tries to instill some form of autocracy in the United States and end our democracy and destroy our freedoms, that the Washington Post not only won't report accurately on these issues, but they're likely going to comply.
Will there be conjugal visits in the pogrom? I'm just asking. I'm just asking questions.
Will they? Well, they're probably, but it's whether or not they'll be consensual. I don't think you want.
Yeah.
And then the bigger issue is not just Washington Post, but this is a symptom of a larger problem, is that numerous media outlets, in the way they've covered Trump over the course of the past, nearly 10 years here, 9 years here, is that they've already made the decision that if Trump does try to assert a dictatorship, that they're not going to be the barrier, the bulwark that speaks truth to power. They've already made it known that they're going to concede in any way possible if it threatens them, regardless of the damage that it does to the United States.
They're going to be the fucking Der Stürmers of media. They've already...
Yeah. And much like the Washington Post, whose tagline is literally "Democracy dies in darkness."
They're turning off that light.
Democracy dies, or democracy is dead. That should be their tagline.
Yep. The media has decided they're going to help turn off the light. And that concludes this episode of Pardon the Insurrection.